once again commercializes her 2 children. Bring in the faceless children. Here they go again.
Easter Sunday delivered 2 completely different royal moments, and that contrast says a lot about where things stand right now. In spring 2026 at Windsor, William and Catherine arrived at St. George's Chapel with George, Charlotte, and Louis, and everything about it felt steady and intentional. 5 figures walking together, dressed sharp, calm, and in sync. The kids looked confident, like they understand what's expected of them without feeling overwhelmed. The next morning, every major British newspaper ran the same image across their front pages. The Sunday papers, the Daily Express, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Telegraph, the Times, all of them pushed that exact moment. It sent a clear message. The future of the monarchy is visible, structured, and secure. At the same time, over in Montecito, a very different kind of content dropped. Meghan shared Easter posts on Instagram featuring the back of Lily's head, a soft toy, a chicken, eggs, and later a skiing clip showing Archie, with Harry on the slopes. The timing of these releases wasn't random, and neither was the contrast. What matters most is what these images actually communicated. The Windsor visuals showed continuity, duty, and a sense of family warmth that feels natural without crossing into overexposure. Those children are part of a long-standing tradition, slowly learning how to represent something bigger than themselves, just like the generations before them. There's structure behind it, meaning behind it, and you can feel it in small details, like the children walking toward the chapel or the king briefly placing a hand on Louis's shoulder.
Who I think are increasingly troubled when you look at what she's putting out there. And even Tom Sykes of The Royalist is saying there's hypocrisy at the heart of Meghan's Easter post of her kids, because the Sussex children are now central to a public image machine that sits awkwardly with Harry.
Now compare that to the Montecito posts, which told a very different story. Observers like Tom Sykes pointed out how the partial angles, quick glimpses, and carefully selected shots don't fully shield the children's privacy. Instead, they offer just enough to keep people watching, while holding something back. This kind of approach is known in media as a tease. It's a deliberate strategy designed to create curiosity, giving the audience just enough to stay interested without fully satisfying that interest. It's commonly used in content creation and branding, not typically by parents whose main focus is keeping their children completely out of the spotlight. It suggests a calculated understanding of how attention works and how to maintain it. And here's where things get even more interesting. Harry has been one of the loudest voices speaking about the risks social media can pose to young people. He's highlighted how platforms like Instagram can affect well-being and has even addressed these concerns at major events. He's framed it as an issue that doesn't get enough attention, especially when it comes to younger audiences. So when that stance is placed side by side with curated posts featuring partial glimpses of their children on one of the biggest platforms in the world, it creates a noticeable contrast. Supporters of this approach argue there's a difference. They say controlled family sharing isn't the same as the broader issues Harry has spoken about, and that occasional holiday content doesn't fall into the same category as the concerns around algorithm-driven exposure. Parents have always shared moments of their children's lives with people around them, and on the surface, that sounds completely normal. That argument makes sense when you look at it on its own. But once you place it inside the bigger picture,
like figure, held back from the rest of the world, trapped in the castle. Oh, and she did remember at the end that she could show the least favorite child too.
the commercial environment where this content is being created, it starts to feel very different. This isn't just a private account shared with close friends and family. Meghan's Instagram operates as a public-facing brand platform with millions watching every move. It's tied directly to product promotion, visibility, and maintaining relevance in a very competitive space. So when Archie and Lily appear on that platform, it isn't just casual family sharing. Anymore, their presence becomes part of a larger strategy, whether intentional or not. They're not just kids in a family moment. They're part of a carefully managed public image that supports a wider operation. Those partial glimpses, the back of the head shots, the quick reveals, they don't come across as purely protective. They look more like calculated content decisions designed to hold attention and keep people curious. That's not random. That's strategy. And then the skiing video adds another layer to all of this. On the surface, it shows Harry enjoying a father-son moment with Archie, presented as a relaxed family holiday. But around the same time, another image surfaced showing Harry on the slopes with Eugenie. He looked happy, relaxed, but noticeably not part of a full family group shot that included Meghan. That's where questions start popping up. Was Meghan even on that trip? Or was the video framed in a way that presents a complete family moment, even if the full situation wasn't shown? Observers have been raising this quietly because the details don't fully line up. There's also the added context that makes people look twice. Reports previously suggested she wasn't comfortable with certain winter activities, yet now there's skiing-related content connected to the same time frame. When you combine that with the separate photo of Harry and Eugenie,
has sailed thanks to the Duchess, their duplicity and lack of loyalty. Harry has made himself one of the most vocal, high-profile critics of the digital economy's effects on children, while Meghan is using one of the world's biggest social platforms to circulate images of their own children to millions. Their defenders argue there is a difference between sharing controlled family content and exposing children to uncontrolled online exploitation. Their critics will say that distinction is wearing thin. Every new post featuring Archie or Lilibet,
it creates a situation that doesn't feel as simple as a straightforward Easter getaway. It starts to look more curated than casual. Now shift focus to Beatrice and Eugenie, because what happened around Easter, who showed up and who didn't, carries serious weight in the bigger royal picture. This isn't just about attendance. It's about alignment, relationships, and direction. When you compare this year's Easter service at Windsor to last year, the absences stand out immediately. Andrew wasn't there. Sarah Ferguson wasn't there. Beatrice and Eugenie weren't there either, and neither were their husbands or children. That's the entire York side of the family, missing from one of the most visible royal gatherings of the year. And this is the same group that, just a year ago, appeared alongside Charles at Ascot in what looked like a genuinely warm and connected family moment. So what changed? The official explanation says Beatrice and Eugenie could have attended but chose not to. But that phrasing leaves room for interpretation, and that's exactly where attention shifts. Observers like Tom Sykes have pointed out how carefully worded that statement is, and how much it doesn't say. This situation mirrors something we've seen before, especially when Andrew stepped back from public duties. At the time, that move was also described as voluntary and agreed upon. But over time, it became something much more permanent. So when the palace says someone chose not to attend, it raises a real question. Was it truly their decision, or was there pressure behind the scenes shaping that outcome?
Desperate and deeply hypocritical. Continuously weaponizing Archie and Lilibet against the royals and using them as brand identity is astonishing, given that Harry has so publicly expressed his own resentment at being drawn into a public-facing brand narrative for the royals without his own consent.
Multiple reports point toward one key factor: William. His position has been consistent and very clear. He will not attend royal events where members of the York family are present. That stance hasn't shifted, and it's now playing out in very visible ways. Look at the Easter service itself. William was there with his family, alongside the King and Queen, but the York family was completely absent. That doesn't feel like a coincidence. It reflects a broader shift in who is considered part of the monarchy's public-facing circle. But here's where things take an even more interesting turn. During that same week, reports surfaced that the king is planning to invite Beatrice and Eugenie to Royal Ascot. And this isn't some quiet, private gathering. This is one of the most high-profile public events in the royal calendar. So now you've got a clear contradiction. They're not present at Easter, one of the most symbolic family moments, but they could appear at Ascot, a major public showcase. That raises serious questions about what's really going on behind the scenes. It becomes difficult to argue that their absence from Easter was purely their own choice when, at the same time, there are plans to include them in another major event. Either they're part of the public-facing royal circle, or they're not. And that's where the bigger issue comes into focus. The York family's connection to Andrew has clearly influenced how they're positioned within the institution. But the response to that situation doesn't seem fully aligned between different sides. On one side, there are signals suggesting distance and separation. On the other, there are moves that suggest continued inclusion. Those mixed messages are hard to ignore. What's emerging is a visible difference in approach between two key figures.
The children grow up and they embrace these wonderful, lovely roles that they have that are very unique and interesting in this service and duty to the country, which is so wonderful and lovely to see. It's just so cool that we see royals sort of grow up and just embrace their destiny in so many amazing ways. We have a lot of royals who have reached the age of maturity recently. So that's just, as a royal watcher, has been.
William appears focused on tightening the public image of the monarchy and limiting who represents it in major moments. Meanwhile, Charles seems more inclined to preserve family unity, especially when it comes to his nieces. This creates a quiet but real tension, because it's not just about individual events, it's about the long-term direction of the institution itself. Charles, by all accounts, still sees Beatrice and Eugenie as family first. He's maintained a sense of connection with them over the years and doesn't appear willing to fully distance himself from them because of their father's situation. William is looking at the situation from a completely different angle, and it's clear he's not backing down. Based on public opinion and wider sentiment, he seems to believe that the York family's connection to Andrew creates a reputational risk the monarchy simply can't afford right now. And he's not just saying it, he's acting on it. He's using the one thing that really matters in this system, his presence. If William chooses not to attend events where certain people are included, that decision carries weight. His attendance brings positive coverage, public trust, and momentum. So when he steps back, it sends a message loud and clear. That's exactly what played out at the Easter service. The decision leaned in William's direction, and the result was a clean, controlled public image that matched his vision. But then comes Ascot, and suddenly things don't look so straightforward anymore. Because if Beatrice and Eugenie are being invited to one of the most high-profile events of the year, it completely complicates the narrative. Are they in or are they out? That's the question nobody seems to be answering clearly.
And I obviously will come to the bizarre Meghan video post, but you contrast that with the total isolation of the two prisoners of Montecito, and specifically their isolation from the British royal family.
Yes, and you think about it as well, Dan, when it comes to Charles and Louis, we've always seen that they've had this special bond. This life, she just wanted to utilize it to catapult herself, what she thought would be, into greater stardom. The British royal family is warm. They embrace each other. They are family. They obviously have some blended families, and I think that's beautiful to see.
And this is where the bigger issue starts to show. There's no consistent line, no firm direction. One moment signals distance, the next suggests inclusion. That kind of mixed messaging doesn't just confuse observers, it chips away at credibility over time. Who is actually setting the tone here? And what is the real long-term plan? Those questions remain open, and that's the problem. A lot of observers have pointed out that this reflects a broader pattern. Charles has often handled difficult situations with caution, leaving things slightly unresolved instead of drawing a hard line. That approach avoids immediate fallout, but it can create long-term uncertainty. The York situation is just the most visible example of that right now. In contrast, William's approach feels much more defined. His stance on the York family is consistent, even if it creates tension behind the scenes. And it's not just about them. His position on rebuilding trust in other areas follows the same pattern. Clear conditions, clear expectations, no shortcuts. He's taking a more direct route, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's why those Easter front pages mattered so much. They weren't carefully staged in some obvious way, but the outcome reflected his vision perfectly. A focused image, a smaller group, and a clear sense of direction about who represents the future. That image, 5 figures walking toward St. George's Chapel, became the defining moment.
Not showing you, honestly, I think for most people that is more aggravating than anything else. Celebrities are able to have children and have social medias where their children aren't a part of it. And Meghan Markle, her social media strategy is all over the place. I mean, sometimes I think she says she wants it to be like her personal Instagram, but it's like public, but it's like, it doesn't work that.
It signaled stability, clarity, and forward movement. Meanwhile, the Montecito Easter content didn't carry the same weight. The partial glimpses, the back of the head shots, the soft imagery, it didn't leave a lasting impression in the same way. One felt solid and memorable, the other felt fleeting. That contrast says everything about how these two approaches are being received right now. And the story isn't slowing down. With Ascot coming up, another decision point is right around the corner. If both the king and the York princesses attend, William will have to decide whether his stance still applies, or if that event falls into a different category entirely. That choice alone could reveal a lot, because what we're watching isn't just about attendance lists, it's about direction, influence, and the future. Shape of the institution. And right now, that direction looks divided. The Easter image made one thing clear. The future, at least visually, is being defined by William's approach. It's structured, focused, and selective. Everything else, the uncertainty, the mixed signals, the unanswered questions, sits in the background. And then there's the Montecito side of things, which adds another layer entirely. The Easter content there deserves a closer look because it reflects the current state of their social media strategy in a very specific way. When Meghan returned to Instagram, it was treated like a major moment. There was expectation, attention, and the idea that this would build strong momentum, a direct connection with a global audience, a fresh start, a new kind of presence. But the results haven't quite matched that expectation. The follower numbers haven't shown strong growth.
It's beautiful grounds, but it just seems like their whole life is pretty empty. And their children, I mean, I'm sure they go to school, I'm sure they have friends, but there was, I think, some weird mention from Meghan how they almost kind of had to force people to come over to their house and play with their kids, because I think Meghan Markle is quite a weird person. And I think
and the engagement hasn't fully aligned with what a platform of that size would typically generate. And the content choices have raised eyebrows, from lifestyle-style posts that feel vague, to tutorials that don't offer much substance, to Easter clips that show only partial glimpses. People have been reacting with confusion more than excitement. One video in particular stood out, a quiet clip showing a child from behind, holding a stuffed toy, alone in a large outdoor space. No other kids, no visible interaction, just a single figure in a wide, private setting. It was likely meant to feel calm and peaceful, but to many viewers, it came across as distant, even a little empty. And that's where the comparison becomes unavoidable. The whale's children are often seen in environments where they interact with each other, with people, with the world around them. School life, public events, shared moments. It creates a sense of connection and balance. The Montecito version, at least based on what's been shown, feels much more isolated. And whether that reflects reality or just the way it's presented, the impression it leaves is important. The skiing content shifts the tone slightly, more active, more energy, with Harry directly involved. But even there, questions linger. The separate image of Harry with Eugenie, the unclear details about who is actually present, it doesn't fully line up in a simple way. It creates that familiar gap between what's shown and what's confirmed. And that's something observers have noticed before. There's been a pattern of presenting things in a polished, ideal way, even when the full picture isn't completely clear.
Firstly, Emily Ferguson revealed that Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, was expected to attend the Easter Sunday service, but she wasn't there, just said that she was under the weather, while apparently Lady Louise, her and Prince Edward's daughter, was busy with her studies and was never going to be there. So that is a standard absence, I think we can say.
Mm-hmm.
The Easter content fits into that pattern for some viewers, now looking again at Beatrice and Eugenie, but this time as individuals. Not just part of a wider situation, it adds another layer. They've built their own lives, their own families, their own paths. By most accounts, they've kept a respectful distance from past controversies and focused on their own responsibilities. They haven't been seen visiting Andrew at Royal Lodge since everything shifted, and there's no clear sign they've supported or been involved in any of the actions that brought attention to his situation. That's what makes this so complicated, because right now, they're not really being treated as individuals. They're being handled as part of a broader family situation, and that changes everything. William's position doesn't separate the daughters from their parents. It treats the York family as one unit when it comes to public appearances. From a strategy standpoint, you can understand it. But on a human level, it's not that simple, because Beatrice and Eugenie didn't choose their circumstances. They've built their own lives, their own families, and by most accounts, they've carried out their roles with consistency and respect in the past. That part gets lost when everything is grouped together under one label. Charles, on the other hand, seems to see it differently. His instinct is to keep them included, to protect that family bond, and to make sure they're not completely pushed out. Inviting them to Ascot reflects that approach. It's a signal that, from his perspective, they still belong. And this is where the real tension sits. This isn't just about power or control.
And that's why what we have seen is William, and I've reported on this obviously extensively, taking control, but it was a really obvious example of that at the weekend. And for Charles's PR team, not a great day, you could argue, because of course those front pages, which I showed you earlier in the segment, completely dominated by William and Catherine.
It's about where responsibility begins and ends. Should individuals be judged based on their own actions, or does association carry consequences no matter what? That's a difficult line to draw, and there's no easy answer. What makes things worse is the lack of clarity. Mixed signals, shifting decisions, and different messages coming from different sides. It creates confusion for everyone involved. Beatrice and Eugenie are left in a position where they can't even plan ahead properly. One week they seem included, the next they're absent. That kind of uncertainty makes it hard to move forward in any clear direction. And it doesn't just affect them. The institution itself starts to look inconsistent when the messaging doesn't line up. Public confidence depends on clarity, and right now, that clarity just isn't there. Even the working relationship between Charles and William feels the pressure. When decisions are being played out through media narratives instead of a shared plan, it creates friction that's hard to ignore. At some point, a clear decision has to be made. Either the York princesses are gradually moved toward a more distant role, with a clear explanation of what that means going forward, or they remain part of the public-facing family, with defined expectations and boundaries. Right now, it's neither. It's a mix of both approaches, and that's where the real damage happens. William, when you look at the bigger picture, comes across as the more structured operator. His decisions follow a consistent pattern, his messaging is sharper, and his vision is focused on a smaller, more controlled public image, centered around the Wales family. It's clear, it's direct, and it works. But being consistent doesn't always mean being right in every situation.
Choreographed display of royal unity, hierarchy, and legitimacy. To pre-announce that you will be including the York princesses, there is a clear statement that Charles sees them as still within the fold. So what you are seeing here today is the acting out of the conflict of two competing courts. On one side, Charles, conciliatory, familial, inclined to preserve a sense of unity above all. On the other, William.
His harder stance might become more difficult to maintain over time, especially in moments where tradition and public expectation come into play. Take Ascot, for example. The York princesses have been regulars there for years. If they suddenly don't appear, that absence will get attention. And if the attention shifts toward internal conflict instead of the event itself, it could weaken the strategy behind keeping that line. So even a firm position can face pressure when the spotlight gets bigger. The Easter images told a strong story. One of stability, structure, and a clear future direction. But the real test isn't one day of headlines. It's whether that same clarity can hold over the weeks and months that follow. Because underneath those polished images, the deeper issues are still there. Questions about the York family's role, ongoing situations tied to Andrew, the wider Sussex dynamic, and the fact that two different visions are still not fully aligned. Easter showed where things are heading, but not how smooth the journey will be. And when you put it all together, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, a focused, unified image moving forward. On the other, a more fragmented picture, with questions still hanging in the air. That's where things stand right now. There's also a bigger layer to all of this. The question of what Charles's reign really represents at this stage. He stepped into the role during a moment no one would have chosen, carrying the weight of a long legacy, while dealing with multiple ongoing challenges at once. Early on, there was strong public support, but everything shifted once his health situation became part of the equation. That alone changed the pace and the dynamic of leadership in ways that couldn't have been predicted.
Do you think it comes in large part from a lack of clear leadership by Charles at the top? And William is attempting to the best he can to try to right the royal ship, because Charles is he's just withering. He just doesn't know quite what to do. I don't think this is the reign he envisioned for himself, and he just can't seem to adjust. William is attempting to do what he can, but
because when a monarch is dealing with serious health challenges, it naturally limits how decisive and consistent they can be over time. And at the same time, it places William in a position where he has to decide how much to step forward and how much to hold back. That's how you end up with what we're seeing now, a split picture. Two approaches, two styles, both visible at the same time. Charles leans toward preserving relationships, even when the situation is complicated. That makes him empathetic. But it can also make decision-making slower and less defined. William takes a more direct approach, focused on long-term stability and a cleaner public image. That makes him effective, but sometimes less flexible when it comes to individual situations. Both approaches have strengths, and both come with challenges. The real issue is that they're not fully aligned. For a strategy like William's to truly work, it needs full support across the institution. The same standards, the same messaging, the same direction at every event. But when different signals come from different places, like the Ascot invitation, it weakens that consistency. And without that consistency, even the strongest plan becomes harder to hold. What's needed now is a clear shared position. Not separate narratives, not mixed signals, but one direction that everyone understands and follows. Because until that happens, the uncertainty will continue, and every public appearance will keep raising the same questions all over again. What's needed right now is simple, but not easy. A single clear position about where the York family stands, communicated consistently and without mixed signals. One voice, one direction, no confusion. But whether that kind of alignment is actually happening behind the scenes, that's still unclear. And even if those conversations are taking place, there's no guarantee they lead to agreement, especially with how different Charles and William's approaches clearly are. What is clear is this: the current situation isn't working. The mixed messaging, the shifting decisions, the back and forth between Easter and Ascot, it creates more questions than answers. And that doesn't help the institution, it weakens it. Those Easter front pages were a rare moment of strong, positive focus during a complicated time. But the reality behind that image, the absence of the York family, the unresolved tensions, the unclear direction, didn't disappear just because the photos looked good. And then there's the Montecito side of the story, which adds another layer to all of this. The Easter content, the partial reveals, the carefully framed moments, the skiing clip with unanswered questions. It all feels like an effort to stay part of the conversation using the tools available. But here's the key point. Those tools don't carry the same weight as what came out of Windsor. They were never going to overshadow that image. Still, the attempt itself says a lot. It shows a clear desire to remain visible, to stay connected to the wider narrative, and to be seen alongside the bigger royal picture, even if the impact isn't the same. And this isn't stopping anytime soon. More content will come. More moments will be shared. The upcoming Australia trip will bring its own wave of attention, and future developments will continue to shift the spotlight in different directions. At the same time, the institution will keep navigating pressure from all sides. Charles's more open, family-first approach, William's stricter, more controlled strategy, the York family's unclear position, and the ongoing efforts from Montecito to stay relevant in the public eye. All of that continues to play out in real time. But Easter Sunday revealed something important. It showed that the Windsor image, the future of the monarchy presented clearly and confidently, is still the strongest signal in the middle of all this noise. The headlines reflected it. The public reaction backed it up. Even the contrast with Montecito content in its own way reinforced it. Because when one side delivers a powerful, unified image and the other struggles to match that level of impact, the difference becomes obvious. That's why the moment mattered. It wasn't just about one day, it was about direction. The institution is still facing challenges, no doubt about that, but the image it presented on Easter Sunday pointed toward a clearer path forward. And the people in that image are the ones shaping that direction. Everything else, the internal tensions, the shifting narratives, the unanswered questions, it all sits around that central picture. So now it comes down to what happens next. Will that clarity hold? Will the decisions ahead match the message that was shown? Or will the same complications start to pull things back into uncertainty again? That's what everyone is watching. Because the destination is starting to look clear, but the journey to get there is still unfolding. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments, because this situation is far from simple. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want more breakdowns like this, and I'll catch you in the next one.